Good afternoon, everyone. We wanted to start off by thanking the organizing committee of this event for allowing us to share this information. We hope to humbly continue with the provocative and interdisciplinary themes of the day so far. The inspiration for this topic and the subsequent project came from this opportunity to speak. So we are grateful to Seton Hall at this event for more than one reason. Our topic intends to examine a connection between service, morality, and the technological innovations of our generation, both the ones that have happened and the ones that the young people here hopefully will be able to bring forward in the future of these inventions. So our project has been based on a few basic assumptions, including the opinion that most Americans consider technological improvements to be a deterministically good thing. We want to challenge one facet of that opinion, specifically concerning poverty and technology's impact on poverty. In addition to having some background research on this and personal experience and being able to consult with other people at the inn itself, we also conducted a little bit of a research project in which we interviewed the guests that we have at the inn and the ways in which they interact with technology itself. But now at this time, if you can let me briefly step away from the topic for a moment, and this is where my true colors come in. We have a personal philosophy connected to what we think is important about what we're going to say, as well as a little bit of a historical background, a little bit of a regional background. First of all, we honestly do not believe that technology is something that should only be seen as a deterministic good, as something that warrants all of our attention and efforts and funding, unless it actually works towards a greater good of the human condition. And we think that the creators of technology ought to act ethically and not just for a profit margin. For an example of this, I'm a really proud Philadelphian, and to do anything right in Philadelphia, we need to see what Dr. Franklin originally had to say about it. And it's important, I think, to note that as one of the founding inventors of the country, as someone who kind of established the importance of technology and the ways in which it can influence our lives, he always held as a prime viewpoint that the main point of technology, the main point of innovation, is to give back to the community as a whole. It was an opinion of his that we would like to carry on even into our own time. Another inspiration for where we're trying to come out in this project, it comes from Muhammad Yunus, who is obviously an outspoken advocate for the poor people of the world, particularly third world countries, but I feel as though when we get into what area of the city of Philadelphia we're talking about, you might be able to draw some parallels. It is his opinion that technology left by itself, without advocacy of people like you in this room, will lead to a negative state for the poor people of the world, in his case, but we also believe in this own country, in America. Like I mentioned before, Americans, I think, tend to see technology as something that's always a positive good, that always has positive externalities. And clearly, we're not going to be able to offer something that denies that unequivocally, you know? This is not something that we are not attached to. It's something that people from my generation were raised with since children, you know, the personal computer revolution. And we can definitely see how it has impacted our lives. On the other hand, I did not grow up in the Kensington section of Philadelphia. I did not grow up completely illiterate of computers. I grew up in schools that taught me how to use computers, and therefore I had those marketing abilities. One other consideration before we go into the actual mechanics of where this subject occurs at and the actual studies that we've done is that like at any other time in the last 50 years of United States government, from the top, from the administration itself, huge amounts of money are being poured into technological improvements. Obama just recently said that he would put a huge amount, probably the largest amount he claims in the history of the United States, for higher technology. And in addition to that, although he did give a lot of very good, very genuine, very eloquent lip service to green technologies and self-sustaining technology, it wasn't mentioned how it would actually help the poor of this country, those who are marginalized in urban centers, and the type of community that the people at St. Francis Inn work with. Now, this is all great in a vacuum in and of itself, but I think that we need to start to talk about exactly what St. Francis Inn is and what types of things we provide there. The first thing to talk about is that it's a Franciscan institution, and there's always been a concern since its start in the late 70s to make it feel like, as was mentioned before by the organizers of this event, a service as opposed to some type of help, where people come in every day to our meals that we have. We're open 365 days a year. We never close for any holidays. And people are given the opportunity to work, to eat as if they were coming into a restaurant. It's not like your typical soup kitchen where you receive food at a counter. And actually, I have a couple pictures. These are some of the guests. For our research, we did interview a number of our guests. This is a picture of them getting ready for breakfast. We have breakfast 3 days a week. Another thing about St. Francis Inn is that it's a private institution. It's not one funded by the government. All day, we receive donations privately, and we go pick up donations privately, a lot of surplus materials. This is a picture of people preparing for that breakfast. Another thing to mention is numbers. Every day at the inn, if we have 2 meals, we might get somewhere in the range of 200 people for breakfast or more. And for our main meal, we may have as many as over 400 people, and usually somewhere in between 200 and 400 people at our main meal a day. We have at least one main meal a day. In addition to those direct aid food services, we provide a plethora of other services, not just at the inn itself. The inn also administers to a thrift store, an urban center, a women's center, and we provide other resources such as mail services and phone services because we have such a large homeless and displaced person community that needs a permanent mail address to which they can receive communication. This is all from our website too, so you should check it out. Another thing to mention is that all these interviews took place in the Kensington section of Philadelphia. I don't know, I'm sure that some of you are probably from the Philadelphia area, so I'm not sure how much explanation this warrants, but definitely a community that has been severely affected in the post-industrial age in which we live. Factories that originally were established there and kept it as a working class community for years have closed probably, I'd say, 2 generations ago and really left a vacuum for what people would be doing in that community. Now we get into kind of a little bit more of the meat of our discussion, which is that this survey that we did among the people that we work with, we asked a number of questions of them within this broad, spectrum. Basically, we took it more as an anthropological approach to try to receive as much text-rich discussion of these topics. And from that, we were actually able to come to a few conclusions which we'd like to share with you. And that's why I have Rory here to share.
Okay. Can you all hear me? Okay. Like Leo said, we've kind of been going for a study-like approach. We had 18 subjects to interview, so that's about 2 shy of your ideal small study number. So we asked, one of our main questions, our first ones, was, do our guests have access to the internet? And when it comes down to it, the interesting thing is a lot of them have different responses. A lot of them would say, yes, I have access to the internet, even if they don't use it, because they recognize that they can go down to the public library. They have a sibling who has a computer. Other ones would have differing opinions. And so it was really interesting to hear their responses. But one thing I'd like to mention for many of our guests, their primary or only means of accessing the internet is through the public library. As you can see, 67% responded yes, which was awfully surprising to me. But nonetheless, it's the number we got. And as it turned out, also in addition to that, we got some other statistics in regards to access about the internet. It was 42% of our guests who use the internet, and they only can use it at the library. They don't have personal computers. They can't afford that, and they don't have any other means. And then we had another 42% of our guests who had the library and some other means. They could go to the library. They could go to a sibling's house. 1 or 2 of them had a home computer. Other ones took GED classes. Other ones were younger and went to school. We had a great range of subjects, aging from 10 years old to people in their 60s and so forth. So it was definitely interesting to see what they all had to say. And we also had a remaining 16% who did not use the library to access it at all. They either just used one's school or from some other source. So moving on. The question still remained, how much access? Because access can be defined in a number of ways. And so what I'd like to do at this point is show you a clip of a dear friend of mine named Marcus, and let him tell you.
How do you use the internet? Like, do you have a computer? Do you?
No, actually, I go to where I have take GD classes at.
Okay.
They have computer roles specifically for the job search,
Nice.
and also like formatting your resume.
Oh, that's nice. That's really convenient, huh?
Yeah, it's very convenient. It's actually better than the library because you get more time.
Yeah, that people were telling us to get like a half hour at the library or something. So do you? Sorry, go ahead.
It really takes 45 minutes to do an application.
Oh, really? That's very.
So as Marcus illustrates, yes, he can access the internet through library. He can access the internet through a GED class, but being able to use the internet at a library for a mere 30 minutes isn't enough for him. So really, is that access? Is that what constitutes access? I also talked to a guest of ours called Dorian, and he affirms the difficulty of accessing the internet. I'm just going to read what he had to say. Although he acknowledges that he can access it, he reveals how difficult this can be. Due to the 30-minute time constraint at the library, the large number of people looking to use them usually have to call and reserve a session in advance, which is an ordeal in and of itself. Furthermore, library hours are limited as a result of the city's recent budget cuts. And it doesn't help that the walking distance just to use a library computer takes time out of your day as well. So as you can see, access can often be something you have to work for in Kensington. And moving on. This is just a chart showing 5 of our guests who decided to answer in terms of days per week when it came to their internet usage. One of them, John, he uses it twice a week to look up cases in the newspaper and so forth. Others used it more frequently, 5 days a week for about an hour, and others actually used it every day. Then other guests, because it was an open-ended question, had other responses. Furthermore, they didn't seem to have as much access or interest in using the internet as often as the other 5 there. Some of them used it weekly, other ones 2 to 3 times a month, and 1 or 2 of them used it very rarely, 2 to 3 times a year, and one guy was using, Dorian actually, who I was just talking about, uses it very sporadically. We got a range of answers in terms of what you use the internet for, including job searching. That was the most popular one. Facebook, MySpace was second most popular. Looking up information and educating yourself was our third top answer. So I thought that was awfully interesting. It just shows that just about everyone's the same and using the internet for a good purpose. For some of the guests, it seemed that their amount of access to internet, computer experience, impacted their feelings about applying online for jobs. This was evidenced by 2 males who I talked to who were middle-aged. They'd applied for jobs before on the internet. They'd never gotten calls back from the companies they applied to. In addition to that, they had trouble using the internet because they were just new to it altogether. And so Edward was a perfect example of that, and he actually was telling me how he would actually rather just use the internet merely for the purpose of looking up the office address and then being able to go down there himself and personally hand in a paper application. And so when you have to have trouble using the internet and it's also just, not within you means to be using it all the time, it's kind of reinforcing in a way for a lot of our guests to not be encouraged to use the internet. So we thought that was awfully interesting. And one of our last questions was, is there enough access to useful technology for you and other Philadelphians? The breakdown, as you can see, is 45% responded yes, 36% responded no, and 18% responded yes or no and in between. Yes and no came from 2 interesting guests, one of them being Edward, another one was Jimmy, and they felt that the reason for that was, although there's a lot of internet access out there that's free, it's hard to get it, and in addition to that, the price for having your own internet is too high. That's something that we found very common among our guests. And so I just thought I'd end up sharing that with you. And at this point, I'm going to hand it off to Celia.
Hi, thank you very much for being such a wonderful audience. I would just like to actually wrap this up really quickly, so we're going to skip the PowerPoint. We have a couple questions or challenges to leave with you today. The first one is to ask how we can bridge this gap in technology. And we have some advice from Muhammad Yunus on this, the author of Creating a World Without Poverty. And he speaks on how technology needs to address the needs of the poor and be tailored to the way that they need to use it. The largest problem that our guests face is not only lack of access to technology, but lack of understanding how to use the technology once they get it. And the main problem this causes in terms of jobs is that when they are unable to access email and understand email, let alone Microsoft Word and Google and other things that we take for granted, not only can they not access information, but they can't access, or they are not eligible for many jobs, especially in business, which would provide the social mobility they need to raise themselves out of poverty. Based on our research, we found that there is a wider gap in technology, and it is creating more of a gap in income levels. So knowing this, and knowing that the internet still has the potential to create a lot of positive change, we'd like you in your own classes and in your own ways to be on the lookout for solutions to this. and also to examine in public policy when people are deciding budget and programs, to just keep an eye out for anything that will allow greater access to technology and greater education in how people can learn to use it. So again, thank you for everything today.